And I call Senator Seward.
Thank you, Mr President. I rise to convince the Senate that, in fact, the government's disastrous and inaccurate automated debt recovery process and its refusal to abandon the system is a great matter of importance, and convince the Senate to support, in fact, that particular contention. The Turnbull government's disastrous and inaccurate automated debt recovery system has resulted in misery, concern, frustration, anger to a great many Australians. While it may be the new year in Parliament, we see no change in the government's ongoing attack on Australians relying on the social safety net. Many of us here in this chamber were lucky enough to have time off with family and friends and loved ones over the holiday period. However, many Australians who are in fact not represented here today were not, and who we are supposed to be representing, were not so fortunate. The Christmas holiday period is in fact already stressful for many Australians who do not have a high and significant income. It brings on issues of ongoing financial stress and in fact affects people's mental health, and this is reflected in the statistics. But during this time, when it's already stressful for many vulnerable low-income Australians, the government chose this time to launch its worst attack of late on income support recipients, and it's certainly the worst attack and worst timed attack that I've seen in my time in Parliament, and I've seen many during that time. I know that many Australians save all year to be able to enjoy the Christmas period with their families and make sure their children have an enjoyable time during that period. And yet, due to the actions of this government, many Australians have been in a state of panic and distress about the debt notices that they have been receiving, demanding payments of thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of dollars without explanation, just days before Christmas. And while the government may play around with some of the words around the debt notices, when they got those letters, that's how people read them, that they were debt notices. Recipients of these notices were assumed guilty and are continuing to be assumed guilty, and they're directed to start making payments virtually immediately, or they must prove that they have made the correct reports through providing pay slips from, in some cases, many years ago, sometimes where businesses are no longer operating, despite the Centrelink website advising until recently that they only need to keep the pay slips for 6 months. Who in this place has still got their pay slips from previous jobs and from jobs from 5, 6 years ago? And when people attempt to do that, they have been directed, and when people attempt to do that, they have been directed, and it's nearly impossible to get in touch with Centrelink. They've been directed to talk to Centrelink, and it's nearly impossible to get hold of Centrelink via phone or online. Try using MyGov website online to resolve a situation. Try using it particularly when you're frustrated and scared about those debt notices. Many have in fact told me about the long waiting times, and I've talked about this in this place on numerous occasions, and the government's response was, yeah, you can phone Centrelink, and they say the average waiting time is a relatively short amount of time. It's not. If you've tried, it's a very long time to try and get through to Centrelink. And in fact, people have been sending me the screenshots of their phone about how long they've spent waiting on the line to try and get through to Centrelink. So Centrelink, because of troubles with the system, 29 million missed calls last financial year. We know that the fundamentals of the system are flawed. Of the debt system are flawed. I've heard many accounts of the flaws that are occurring, so let me just talk about a few. What they've been doing is averaging out wages that somebody has earned over a year and then match it to Centrelink payments over a year. Or the ATA records and then they say the debt is owed. There's varying types of records that are being matched up across by the computer. This is a recipe for disaster, as the records simply can't be properly matched, as we have seen, because there's been payments that are being averaged out that are short term. They're then being calculated over a period of year when they're only, in fact, weren't employed for the whole year. I've also heard of school teachers on short contracts who have been receiving debt notices as over $10,000 because the automated system does not recognise that the pay slips they have received with the name of the school on them, which they teach, are in fact the same as the records the ATO has, where it says Department of Education. So they assume there's two different incomes there, and therefore say to teachers, you owe a debt. This is from the system that the government was trying to defend during question time, saying it was working fine. Well, how can it be working fine when one wage is being counted twice because the system doesn't recognise different names for the same employer? I've heard that people have received debt notices saying they owe $10,000 for overpayment while on work cover, and people from having to fly interstate. This is one of the accounts I got. They're flying interstate to try and retrieve documents from 5 years ago. And then they can't be uploaded to the Centrelink website. Many people have started paying their debts despite having records to prove that they've been paid correctly, simply because they can't get in contact with Centrelink, or their internal review is taking so long that they don't want to be sent debt letters. They don't want to be sent a debt collector. They don't want to be opening a door to a debt collector. And because they are scared, they get these notices and they are scared, and they can't, or they can't access their records. So they start paying. Now, there was some overpayment records being, overpayment notices have been sent out for quite a while. And in fact, people have now contacted me saying, I started paying this debt because I thought they must be right. I thought they were wrong, but I thought I must have done something wrong. It wasn't until they started hearing all the other people getting errors in debt notices that they realised that something was wrong. I've been contacted by Centrelink workers who tell us that even when the paperwork has been uploaded as requested, it simply sits there as there is no one to process it, and people's erroneous debt remains and gets sent to the debt collectors. Those on the inside say that delays in processing are literally getting longer by the day, to the extent that things are getting completely out of control. Some of the overpayments are a result of, or so-called overpayments, are a result of system or administrative errors by Centrelink. When I asked a question on notice about this, Centrelink doesn't even count. The department doesn't count the number of errors that they've made. So we have no idea how many of these so-called overpayments are a result of, in fact, errors by the agency. And then, even when they do identify it's a result of an error by the agency, there's no grace period for people. It's not their fault that they've been overpaid. All these are problems with the system. All these are problems with the automated system. They're creating debts that people don't, in fact, have, because the government is so focused on trying to undermine our social safety net. They're so anxious to put blame and to victimise people that are vulnerable Australians that rely on our social safety net, when they're letting millions and millions and millions of dollars in tax avoidance, letting people get away. They're negotiating with people that owe millions and millions of dollars, letting them off millions of dollars, and yet they are chasing the most vulnerable members of our community with a system that is totally flawed and that needs to be abandoned. The government can't stand here. They try to stand here in this place today and defend a flawed system where they're having direct impact on people's lives. They ruined their Christmas. People are stressed. It's resulting in mental health, and we are getting phone calls into my office with people that talk about taking their own lives as a result of this process. We, of course, have been referring them on to the appropriate advice, such as Lifeline. But when you get to a situation where people are talking about literally taking their own lives, they're scared witless about how they're going to pay the bills. You open a bill and see a debt for $10,000. Open a letter and see a debt for $10,000. This system is broken. It needs to be abandoned. They need to scrap it now.